I want women, doctors, local political leaders, letting the democracy that's always allowed our nation to thrive, to put the best ideas forward so states can decide for themselves.
And there it is. Dr. Oz just made clear exactly what's at stake in this election. If he's elected, he'll make sure that your healthcare decisions are between a woman, her doctor, and a local politician. So when you're a couple that's ready to conceive, ready to finally start your family, and you're preparing for that special night, just make sure there's plenty of room in the bedroom for the city council to fit too. I mean, my God, this is the same party that just a few years ago warned that the Affordable Care Act would lead to death panels. They warned that a law expanding healthcare access to tens of millions of Americans would mean that whether you live or die would be decided by a panel of people. And now that same party is quite literally running on the idea that your private healthcare decisions are not just between you and your doctor, but your local politicians too. I'm curious, which local political leaders exactly does Oz want to decide the fate of women's bodies? Mayor, treasurer, school board, HOA? I just figure that we should know, given that these are the people who will be involved in our healthcare decisions if Oz is elected. And let's be clear, this has always been the Republican Party's position. They aren't interested in bodily autonomy, they're interested in imposing their religious edicts onto everyone else. And while Oz has tried his best to pivot to the middle for the general election, don't forget that he made his position abundantly clear, that he believes abortion is murder. Here's an ad from John Fetterman outlining exactly that using Oz's own words.
I do believe life starts at conception, and I've said that multiple times. If life starts at conception, why do you care what age the heart starts beating at? It's still murder if you were to terminate a child, whether their heart's beating or not. But if you want to know the actual date, it's usually at 9 weeks that the heart starts beating.
This is settled case law most of my life, almost 50 years.
I think Roe was wrongly decided. This is a correction of an error. The states should be making these decisions.
If I'm in the United States Senate, I would immediately support the elimination of the filibuster to make sure that we codify women's reproductive freedom in law.
Can you describe for me your position on the issue of life and abortion?
I am strongly pro-life. I believe life starts at conception.
If I ever sit in judgment on voting on a Supreme Court justice, Roe v. Wade will be one of my litmus tests.
Do you support limiting abortion?
I'm okay with the Supreme Court making the right decision based on what they think the Constitution says.
I believe women's reproductive freedom, don't mess with it. Abortions are going to continue in America, whether it's legal or not. They just won't be safe if they're illegal, and we can't ever go back to that. We just can't.
So if there's any doubt as to where that guy would stand as far as when a nationwide ban on abortion is brought up for a vote in the Senate, he's already made it abundantly clear. So while he'll try to waffle about what he'd do, let's not pretend that if elected, he wouldn't immediately fall in line. That's what Republicans do. They lie about how moderate they'll be on abortion before immediately turning around and imposing the most extreme edicts they can cook up. And you don't have to look far. Here's a video from the team at the recount showing Lindsey Graham doing exactly that.
I think states should decide the issue of marriage, and states should decide the issue of abortion. I think we should have a law at the federal level that would say after 15 weeks, no abortion on demand.
This is not a states' rights issue. This is a human right issue. I don't care what California does.
So when Republicans make their little promises, know that those promises are only valid until the very moment that they inevitably change their minds. Consider, too, Republicans are saying all of this weeks before the election. If they're willing to publicly espouse this woefully unpopular position that abortion should be banned nationwide, something that only 30% of the country supports, then just imagine what they're going to do when they don't have to face the voters. I mean, think about it. This is a move that is so aggressively unpopular that even the voters in Kansas rejected it by a net 20-point margin. Kansas. Republicans looked at that and said, we're too extreme for even Kansas? Great, let's make this happen nationwide. So if their closing pitch to voters is that they're going to oppose the will of more than 2/3 of Americans, then imagine what kind of laws they'll introduce when they've got 2 years and a clear runway before they have to go in front of another voter. It'll be guaranteed nationwide bans on abortion, bans on same-sex marriage, bans on contraception and birth control. They'll move to eliminate Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. They'll end funding to transition to renewables. They'll end provisions put in place to lower the cost of prescription drugs. They'll reverse efforts that make the rich pay their fair share and instead transfer that burden to working-class Americans, as they always do. These are not elected officials who are in any way responsive to the will of the people. They are theocrats who will assume power by any means necessary, even if that means lying about their positions during debates, and then impose their religious edicts onto the rest of the country. If Republicans take control, we don't have to guess what will happen because they've already broadcast it. They will try to pass nationwide bans on abortion. They'll do it federally, where luckily Joe Biden's in place for now to veto it, and they'll do it in the states, where there's not always a Democrat to veto it. So if you believe that a woman has the right to choose what she does with her own body in the United States of America in 2022, then vote for the only party that's vowed to codify abortion as the first move with an expanded Senate majority.
That's why in these midterm elections are so critical to elect more Democratic senators to the United States Senate and more Democrats to keep control of the House of Representatives. And folks, if we do that, here's the promise I make to you and the American people. The first bill that I will send to the Congress will be to codify Roe v. Wade. And when Congress passes it, I'll sign it in January, 50 years after Roe was first decided the law of the land. And together we'll restore the right to choose for every woman in every state in America. So vote. You got to get out the vote. We can do this if we vote. I'm asking the American people to remember how you felt. How you felt that day the extreme Dobbs decision came down and Roe was overturned after 50 years. And I'm asking you, and by the way, it's not just affecting your young generation. It's affecting children, moms, grandmoms, grandpops, all the entire generations, all the way across the board. And I remember asking, I want you to remember that the final say does not rest in the court now. It does not rest with extremist Republicans in Congress. And finally say about your right to choose that it rests with you. And if you do your part and vote, Democratic leaders in Congress, I promise you, will do our part. I'll do my part. And with your support, I'll sign a law codifying Roe in January. Together, let's remember who we are. We are the United States of America, and there's nothing beyond our capacity. So vote, vote, vote. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops.
So the choice at this point is clear. You've got one party promising that the very first piece of legislation that'll be signed in January will be a law codifying Roe. Or you've got another party that already, right now, has legislation pending that would ban abortion nationwide. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Don't listen to what these people say. Watch what they do. Before you go, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please make sure to subscribe to my channel. You can click the thumbnail right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work even further, the best way is to subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. There you can check out my interviews with major players in the world of politics, including President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, Katie Porter, Jamie Raskin, and so many more. Plus other interviews that live exclusively on the podcast. That link is also right here on this screen, or just search No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen wherever you listen to podcasts.